back. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
Will you load 16 tons? What do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store.
Well, our guest certainly likes that choice of song. Our producer, Dwayne Bishop, raking up a little Tennessee Ernie Ford in 16 tons. Another day of work and another day of debt. Our guest in studio is Phil McCourt, Senior Vice President from Abakhan and Associates. They are proposal administrators and trustees in bankruptcy with 5 offices around British Columbia, from as far north as Prince George and Vernon in the interior to the coast, where they have offices in Vancouver, Surrey, and in Victoria as well. Phil, let's talk a little bit about the consumer proposal. Just before the break, we identified the fact that when people get into serious financial difficulties and you start feeling isolated, you start feeling the whole world is against you, and you know you've really made a big mistake or two along the way, and then you figure you get to the point, well, I'm at the end of my tether. I'm just going bankrupt. I've had it. And then they sit down with a pro like yourself and discover, to their surprise, to their amazement in some cases, no, I actually don't have to go bankrupt. I can take another route that's perfectly legal, sanctioned by the courts, and it's called a consumer proposal.
Consumer proposal.
So tell us about consumer proposals, Phil. What are they?
Consumer, as the word, a consumer proposal for consumers to use. Actually, the rules about consumer proposals is if you are an individual, not a company, but an individual, and you owe less than $250,000.
Okay.
And that does not include mortgage on your principal residence, but can include other debts. And actually, until a few years ago, the number was 75,000, but somehow the government decided to better bump it up to $250,000, probably because that's what was happening. So if you owe that amount, if you owe more than $250,000, you can't avail yourself of a consumer proposal. You have to go into another proposal. But we won't get into that one right now. A proposal provides that you can make arrangements with your creditors to pay them a certain percentage of their debt. It's a bit of a balancing act. What can you afford, and what will the creditors accept? And normally it's in the range, when we're talking about credit card debts, it's in the range of 25 to 30 cents on the dollar.
Okay.
Payable over a maximum of 5 years. So that's 60 payments. And by doing a consumer proposal and completing a consumer proposal, you avoid bankruptcy.
Okay.
Which has some ramifications on credit ratings.
So in order to even be in a position to propose or to file a consumer proposal, there are a few basics that have to be in place. Number one, I would assume, Phil, is that you have cash flow. You have a job or some guaranteed form of secure income every month, because that you're proposing to pay off your creditors based on your cash flow. Right?
Exactly. Based on what your income is. So yes, there's no point in doing a proposal that you're not. I mean, there are no guarantees, but there's no point in doing a proposal that you don't think you can complete.
Right.
There's actually some situations where people would be required to make a proposal if they make a certain level of income, depending on the number of dependents they have, and it's a calculation we won't get into, where they're going to have to make a proposal rather than go bankrupt.
Okay.
But in lots of cases, there are people who even though nobody could fault them for going bankrupt because their income, or the Bankruptcy Act surplus income, is not that much, they would rather do a proposal than go bankrupt.
And where do you trustees come in all of this? I know, obviously, a trustee is a person licensed by the Government of Canada under the Bankruptcy Act, and only a trustee in Canada is authorized to file a consumer proposal on behalf of an individual.
Yeah,
correct?
It's interesting that a trustee in bankruptcy, you can only go bankrupt by going to a trustee in bankruptcy.
Right.
You can only file a consumer proposal by going to, as you've mentioned, it's got proposal administrator.
Right.
And amazingly, all proposal administrators right now are trustees.
Okay.
There was an attempt to make some other group proposal administrators, but that didn't go anywhere. So even though the name is proposal administrator, the only people that are proposal administrators are trustees in bankruptcy.
Okay,
right
and so help me out here. This is where a lot of people get a little confused. Whose side are you on? As the professional, you're kind of like, I get the feeling you're kind of like a Vince Reddy, like an arbitrator, because you have to act on my interest as the beleaguered consumer in hopeless financial difficulty, but you've also got these angry creditors out there to whom I owe some money. So whose side are you on?
We wear lots of hats, but we wear the hat for the debtor. The debtor comes in, the person that owes money, and they come in and ask, they want help.
Sure.
And we have to offer them help. We tell them the ramifications of their situation and what they're doing and what they can do, and give them the options about proposal and bankruptcy, and caution them about certain things, and ask them certain things about their life, about who they are, have they had assets in the past that they now no longer have, and what happened in those kind of questions to have they paid one creditor over another creditor, for example, those sort of caution things that give us the independence that we need to be able to advise the other group in this game, which are the creditors.
Right, okay.
So the debtor comes in, we advise them. The creditors rely on us to be able to tell them if there's anything untoward. 99% of the time, the people who are filing are innocent. They're unfortunate debtors.
Right.
Sometimes they're not. And sometimes we are able to find out things that perhaps the creditors may be interested in knowing about what's going on in their lives. So that's the two different roles.
And a proposal administrator / trustee in bankruptcy in Canada, Phil, is an officer of the court as well, correct?
We are an officer of the court, yes.
And what does that mean?
That means when we report to the court or talk to the court can rely upon what we say to them the same way they could rely on a lawyer.
Okay.
I mean, we're not lawyers,
right?
And we don't, but the court is able to rely, can expect to be able to rely on what we say.
Now, the reason I asked you about this officer of the court business, because if you're in personal financial difficulty and you go to a trustee and you sit down for this consultation, and you go through all of the issues and the reasons why you're in debt and all the rest of it, but one of the reasons people are reluctant to come forward and resolve their financial issues is because, well, we're supposed to be able to take care of this by ourselves. We're supposed to be smart enough to figure this stuff out. We're not supposed to get into huge, hideous trouble. And yet we do. So then, if we're going to see a trustee, and these guys are officers of the court, geez, if I publicly admit my inability to run my financial affairs properly, it's going to end up in the paper, for crying out loud. I'm going to be publicly shamed. This is where people go. It gets weird, Phil, when you get into trouble and people start yelling at you, and your life just sort of deteriorates into a kind of a paranoid state.
Yeah. Proposals are neither consumer. No proposal is ever advertised in the newspaper.
Okay, it's an important thing to get out there.
Yeah. It's often, most of the time, there are court documents. So, and court documents are open for anybody to see. Not that anybody, not that too many people make a practice of going and rifling through the court documents.
Right.
Summary bankruptcies are also not advertised. Summary bankruptcies are bankruptcies where there are no or less than $15,000 worth of assets, and they are also not advertised. So proposals aren't advertised in the paper, and neither are summary bankruptcies.
So okay, that's just an important thing, because again, people look for excuses not to act. You said that earlier, that in many cases it's typical that a person or a couple will take a year or two or more of this spiraling downwards and crazy financial stuff before they finally hit rock bottom and seek out the assistance of a person like yourself, a trustee.
Yeah.
So people in that period of that spiral, things go really sideways, and people develop all sorts of mistaken ideas about what's going to happen when they try and remedy things and sort things out and get it back on track. And public shaming, I know it sounds weird, but people consider that and balk at the idea of getting things right because they don't want to deal with that. It's not going to happen, you're telling us, but people need to hear that, Phil.
Well, yeah, it's not gonna be advertised. I think public shaming is I think personal shame, feeling shame. Most people feel it just in themselves anyway.
Absolutely.
So if it's publicized, I suppose that would make a difference. But anyway, it's not.
And I would also think it's important to point out that when a person does sit down with yourself, or George, or Brett, or any of your colleagues at Abakhan, this there's no judgment going on here. You feel bad enough. You don't need another scolding and a finger wagging or any of that sort of stuff. You need help from a competent professional. And so I think it's important for people to understand that you're not going to be judged. You're going to be helped.
That's exactly right. There's no judging going on at all. The first interview, no cost initial interview,
sure,
if you like, and find out about the person. But there's no judging. All we want to find out, and we do want to help. I mean, that's what makes our job. One of the things that makes our job a good job. That's why I like my job, actually.
Is being able to help people get their lives back, right?
Yeah.
When a person sits down, and you were talking, I'm going to follow up on something you alluded to. You have this discussion with a person. You have a series of questions that you would ask about their financial circumstances,
yes,
and cash flow and all of that other stuff. If a person tries to, game you, if they try to fudge the numbers, is that a crime?
I could be. There are certain duties. If you have things that your creditors should benefit from and you hide those things, that's an offense. Can be an offense under the Bankruptcy Act, which has some criminal. The Bankruptcy Act talks about jail, actually.
Right.
Certainly fines.
Okay. So the reason I bring this up is because, you sit down and you disclose, here's my cash flow, here's how much I owe. And the only thing I don't tell you about is that little cottage I've got up in the Caribou, a little fishing place that I've got. Bought it 25 years ago. Mustn't be worth much anyway, not even worth bringing up. Yeah. Well, so you go away and you know everything about me except that little fishing camp I neglected to tell you about. Mm. So somebody's going to find that out as an asset. And what happens to the person who failed to disclose fully all of their net worth?
Well, first of all, if they've filed bankruptcy, there's going to be some impact on their being able to get discharged from bankruptcy.
Okay.
If they've in essence lied to the trustee.
Yeah.
And being discharged from bankruptcy is a big deal. That's the date that all the debts go away. So if you've lied and you're found out, then you will lose the asset, as you should have done. Not lose it, but as it should have been part of your estate to start with.
Right.
And then the ramifications of that are that your discharge certainly could be opposed by the trustee.
Right.
Whether somebody wants to go and take time and money and have you convicted of an offense under the Bankruptcy Act, that's a cost issue.
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily looking for somebody to be locked up, but probably just to point out the fact that if you're going to sit down with a trustee and you're going to go to disclose all of your life, basically lay it out on the table, then lay it all out on the table.
And most people
withholding information is silly.
Most people do.
Right.
Most people are very transparent.
Well, I would think, Phil, again, coming to the fact that if they've taken this much time to finally come around to seeing you, their life is not very much fun. So why not get all that bad stuff out on the table and deal with it?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. We need to take a quick break here. When we come back, lots more to talk about with respect to consumer proposals. Yesterday was RSP deadline, so we'll find out about The value of an RSP can, for example, people you owe money to get your RSP money that you've been saving all your life. We'll find out with Phil McCourt from Abakhan and Associates. They are proposal administrators and trustees in bankruptcy with 5 offices around our province and located online at abakhan.com. That's ABAKHAN.com. More on Boomer Life in a moment.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.